Hello, everyone. Greg Lefersky here, founder of True North Development. Welcome to our podcast, where we have real conversations with real people about real transformation. We hope that you'll be inspired to take action, to identify your purpose, and walk in it. Enjoy. Have you ever been charged with the responsibility of caring for someone else's resource? Maybe you were gifted the opportunity to use someone's home or condo, or maybe you work in a capacity where you're caring for someone else's customer. Maybe you're doing a simple job like babysitting. In all those situations, you're charged with the responsibility of caring for someone else's property. And that's technically called stewardship. Yes, Mike?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm excited to talk about stewardship today with you. And I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience. So kick off that part of the conversation, would you?
Sure. This is kind of an interesting year for me, Greg. I turned 75 years old. Mary, my wife, turns 70 years old. We will have been married 20 years. And this is my 50th year as a financial advisor. So a lot hitting us this year.
Your 50th year. So I've been alive for a little over 50 years. I can relate from that perspective, but I've not had one profession for over 50 years. So tell us about that. How did you get involved in the business of advising people about their finances?
Well, this is absolutely a God story.
Okay.
So going back 50 years, we were expecting our first child. I had a pretty good job working for a home builder. And then the economy changed. This was in Central Florida. And all of a sudden, I lost my job. And I'm panicking. I'm getting ready to be a new father, all of those responsibilities. And I have no income. Only thing I did have to my name was a business degree. And I literally went out in Orlando knocking on doors all day long, looking for someone who would give me an interview. I had no qualifications. I didn't care about my degree. If somebody would pay me enough to dig a ditch that I could feed my family, I'd do that. Well, one of the doors that was open to me was a large, well-known insurance company, life insurance. I didn't have a clue about that. But I went in. They were very receptive. Manager came out and met me. Now, here's a key image. Back in the 70s, the top-rated TV program during that time was a program called All in the Family. Many people will remember that.
Yes.
And one of the stars was a fellow by the name of Archie Bunkers.
Oh, yes.
He was known for being crass and rude and crude and in your face, and not known for particularly intelligence. Well, believe it or not, this insurance company manager was a look-alike and a sound-alike and a behave-alike for Archie Bunkers.
Okay.
So this is my first concept. Well, he brings me into his office. He sits me down at the corner of his desk. He gives me a employment test. Well, I zip right through it. He looks at it. He grades it. He says, "Do you know you're the first applicant that ever scored perfect?" And I'm thinking, this was first grade. You know, I got a college degree. Well, what Archie did, he's sitting there behind this enormous wooden desk in a red leather chair on wheels. You can kind of get a picture of that.
I can, yes.
And he puts me over at the corner of the desk. Now, I am incredibly green and timid. And for 5 hours, I sit there while Archie conducts his business. It's mostly his agents and sales managers coming in and reporting to him all of the things all the tools they use to get somebody to buy a life insurance policy. And I am not impressed. But I am too timid to get up and walk out of there. Well, come 6 o'clock, Archie stands up. He reaches over, shakes my hand, and offers me a job. I look at him with all the earnestness I can gather, and I simply say, "Thank you, but I see nothing at all about this opportunity that interests me."
Wow.
And I walked out. I don't care if we starve. That's not what I want to do.
Huh.
Well, this was on a Friday, Greg. Next Monday, I'm out knocking on doors. I come home, and somebody has parked a bright red new Cadillac in the driveway of my single wide mobile home, of which I'm very proud. Well, I don't know who's parked it there, but the thought that goes into my mind is whoever owns that car paid more for that than I paid for my house. Well, I walk into the door, and there sitting on my living room sofa
Wow.
is Archie.
Oh.
Now, I was kind of stunned, and I'm standing with my back to the open door. Archie stands up. In his crudeness, he steps over the coffee table. He's coming at me, and I can just barely remember who this man was. Defensively, Greg, I stuck out my hand to shake his hand.
Okay.
Well, he's coming at me. He takes his two fat, grubby hands, gets my hand in between, pulls me right up in his face.
Wow.
And he said words that changed my life. He said, "Young man, I have made a fortune in the insurance industry knowing how to select the right people to come to work for us. And I made a special trip to your home today to tell you you made a serious mistake in turning me down." I've been on a lot of job interviews at that time. Nobody treated me like that. And all I could remember was him saying, "I'll give you a guaranteed paycheck for 3 months."
Okay.
So I asked if that was true. He said yes. I said, "Okay, I'll try." What's in my mind? I just bought 3 months to keep hunting for a job. I'm not going to do this. I look back on that a lot more mature than I was then, Greg.
Yeah.
And here's what I see. Scripture's full of examples of God using broken people to put in our path to accomplish his purpose.
Yes.
That's how I got into this business, is God chose a man knowing how timid and green I was to pull me into this business. Now, there's an interest in the end of that story.
Okay.
3 months later, I get a notice from home office that nice guaranteed paycheck just expired.
Oh.
You're now going to be paid on commission.
Okay.
Now, I didn't understand all of that, remember?
Yes, I am.
I had met the quota the company told me, but something like life insurance, you don't get paid right away.
Right.
And here I was going to be making $75 a week for the next 3 months. He had been paying me $180. It was Friday afternoon. I have never experienced humiliation because I thought I had done everything right. I waited for everybody to leave the office. I wrote out a little 2-sentence resignation and walked into his office. He saw me coming. He saw what was in my hand. He took his 2 fat hands and slammed them down on the desk.
Okay.
He pulls himself up and gets right in my face, and this is what he says. "Young man, I hired you to do a man's job. Turn around, get your butt out of here, and go back to work." I had 2 choices. Stand there and cry. That's how humiliated I was.
Yeah.
I just turned and walked out. I didn't say a thing. Come Monday morning, $75 on Friday was more than not having a job. So I went back to work. 3 months later, home office sends me a letter. "You're now going to be paid $325 a week." I never looked back after then.
Wow.
I said, "This can work for me."
just because of your success? How did you go from 75 to 325?
Well, the backlog, all of those life insurance policies that people had written and paid for
Got it.
caught up to me.
Okay.
And it takes some time. I wish I had known that, or maybe better than I didn't.
So as a young man, you couldn't really see the forest through the trees, and God put somebody in your life that you didn't understand, that ruffled your feathers a little bit, but he kept you in the game.
Kept me in the game.
So that you could have delayed gratification, so that there would be a blessing down the line. Wow.
And then God followed that up with a really cool one.
Okay, tell me more.
In the sales industry, you typically have managers.
Yes.
Who teach you, who model to you what the standards are of the business and representing yourself.
Yes.
And it had been 2 years later. I was enjoying what I was doing. I was doing very well financially, much better than I had been at the other job.
Mm-hmm.
And the manager comes over one afternoon and he sits down with me and he kind of commends and acknowledges me. Mike, you seem to be doing very well in this. Are you happy? Yes.
Yeah.
This is what he said. If you decide to make financial services, is what we call it, your career choice, I would encourage you to become a student of the business. Learn everything you can about what you do.
Okay.
Well, in many businesses, there are educational tracks, there are certifications, there are degrees and about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to him and I said, that makes sense.
Yes.
I went and signed up for my first certification.
Okay.
Now, we didn't have online back then.
Right.
You went to a building and had a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Took me 3 years
Okay.
to get the first one.
Got it.
Then there was another one and another one, a master's degree along the way. It took me 15 years.
Wow.
But the confidence it gave me that when I'm helping somebody, I know what I'm talking about. So those two things that at the time, I didn't see that was the hand of God.
Wow.
But it sure got me off.
So those two early moves by Archie,
yes,
keeping you engaged, right, in a way that you didn't understand, led to a 50-year career where you're competent, you're educated, you're motivated to really serve people at a high level, right?
Yes.
But it took some time, it took some faith to lean into something you didn't really understand. You had to do some hard things that didn't really pay you back right away.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing story.
God sent me. He often repeats and uses us as stewards.
Yes.
He sent me a 19-year-old young man that I talked to this past Saturday.
Okay, yes.
He dropped out of school. He became an electrician. He was making pretty good money for a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
And he was pretty sharp. He said to me, I've already recognized I'm never going to do really well just being paid by somebody else. I need to own my own company. My response was, if you're serious of that, become a student. Learn everything about what you're doing, and you'll rise to the top.
It is true. We don't like that idea, right?
No.
We want to, especially as a teenager or young adult. I know I did. I felt like I was competent.
Yes.
And I should be the general manager right out of the gun, that I didn't need to spend time in the trenches learning about the business. But it's always better for us, right, to learn the business by doing it and by being a student and by being humble.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome.
Serving others.
Yes.
And we do that with excellence.
So when I approached you, I asked you to come visit with me and to talk about financial health, and you came back and said, hey, that's really only part of what I think we should talk about. Let's talk about biblical stewardship, or being a steward. So tell me, where was the epiphany? What led you to this idea that we should talk about stewardship as a category of True North here? We're focused on personal development. We want to give people resources and inspiration so that they can live in their potential. Yeah. Right? So stewardship, how does it fit in? Why were you inspired to bring that topic to the table?
Well, it's been my life, because I'm a finance guy. The Bible has a lot to say about money and specifically about stewardship. So I have taught stewardship courses in our church to help people understand what biblical stewardship is. Greg, very few people understand that. So I have two questions. I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked every time I've taught this.
Okay, all right.
Based on your understanding in the Old Testament, okay, who was likely the wealthiest person in the Old Testament?
I would have to say Solomon. He has the reputation of being the wealthiest man to ever live, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would agree.
Okay.
Everything that I read, he was far and above.
Yes.
And he attributed all of that to God blessing him.
Yes.
Now, here's the hard question almost nobody knows right at first.
Okay.
Old Testament,
Old Testament.
your opinion. Who was the best steward in the Old Testament?
I don't think I can answer that question, Mike. I don't
Okay.
know.
This is one of those, when I tell you, you'll instantly understand.
Okay.
Joseph.
Okay.
Now, think about Joseph's training.
Yes.
Being sold into slavery.
Yes.
Being accused of, being inappropriate.
Yes.
In prison. Even in prison, faithful.
Yes.
To God.
Yes.
And God set up the circumstances. The most powerful figure in the known world was Pharaoh.
Pharaoh, yes.
And he had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph had a God who knew how to understand that. And when Joseph came at Pharaoh's request and interpreted his dreams, Pharaoh made him steward. He said, "You are second in command only under me, not of a palace, not of a king," and that economy of the world. The Egyptian economy at that time was the largest in the world.
Yes.
And here Joseph became the steward. Bible doesn't tell us how much he owned.
Right.
I'm sure Pharaoh treated him well.
Yes. Yes.
But it bedazzles my mind to think, how much did Joseph manage compared to what Solomon's one person worth was?
Oh.
Many times over.
Yes.
So that's the best biblical starting point. What does it mean to be a steward of somebody else's resources? And that's the simple explanation or meaning. A steward manages things that don't belong to them for somebody else. Now, the Bible is very clear when we look at all of the different examples, a lot in the New Testament. So people are very familiar with the parable of the talents. Okay. And Jesus is telling this, that he gave one steward 5 talents. He gave another 2. He gave another 1. The scripture says, according to their ability.
Yes.
So Jesus knew the 1 talent person didn't have the ability of the 5.
Yes.
And it turns out those were great deals of money. And Jesus said, I will come back and hold you accountable for what you did.
Yes.
2 of those 3 were glad when Jesus came back.
Yes.
They had been good stewards. It was never their money. But they came proudly before the master and said, here's what I'm returning to you. Now, we've all heard the scripture, well done, good and faithful servant. The only time that is in the scripture is in that parable.
Yes.
Talking about money and being a steward over that.
And it's interesting in that parable, the man that was given 1 talent, and instead of, I suppose he used his resources fearfully.
He was in fear.
As he buried it. Didn't put it in the bank, didn't draw any interest, didn't tell anybody about it. He just buried it.
Yeah.
Now, he was able to give it back when the time came, but I think he was even labeled as evil, wicked, right?
Yeah.
Because he used a fearful approach to manage resources.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? And maybe you would look at the gentleman that was given 5 talents. I mean, we might look at that as saying he was reckless because he went out and invested it kind of in maybe aggressively, like a financial advisor would put it in risky funds or something like that. But it came back and he doubled, right, the amount, and he was praised for that because he used the resource, right, to invest in other things, allowing it to grow.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on that? Why was Jesus promoting this idea that stewardship means we're using our resources widely? It doesn't mean we're simply protecting a resource. We're using it to do good in the world, I suppose. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's all about the kingdom.
Okay.
So Jesus didn't he didn't say everything he could have said. He didn't say what the master was doing with the money.
Got it.
So the master is the one that already has ownership. In this case, it was Jesus teaching the parable.
The parable, yes.
And I've often heard, as you probably have, naysayers who say the church is not a business.
Yes.
Well, that's true. We're not a business.
Mm-hmm.
But look at that parable and tell me that was business.
Right.
You know, the man did something
Yes.
to work and invest that money over an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
He was a businessman.
Yes.
The 2 parable, he was a businessman.
Yes.
They just had different levels of ability.
Yes.
But it's all for the kingdom.
Got it. Yeah. So, and, Jesus was teaching about money. This parable was about money. And
Yes.
of course, money shouldn't drive us. Money's never labeled as evil.
Yeah.
The love of money is labeled as evil in the Bible.
Yeah.
And when we chase the money, we find out pretty quickly that can be very painful and unfulfilling, right?
Yeah.
Like the gentleman that was given 1 talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So beyond, like when you and I talked about this podcast, I was focused on financial health. You said it's bigger than that, Greg. There's an example here of what stewardship should look like, right, that Jesus gave us in the parable of the talents. How is it bigger than money?
Okay.
How is stewardship bigger than money?
Now, recognize we have to be careful when we talk about things that we can't point to a scripture.
Okay.
So we can point to a scripture about money
Okay.
many times. But in my journey, so 25 years ago, I was in a small group of believers. One of these guys had a calling to go into ministry.
Got it.
And he kind of had this high about him. He recognized people who God wanted to train in stewardship. I'm one of them.
Mm.
He takes me on a retreat to Colorado. And there's about a dozen of us from Orlando that go with him. And we meet with other men who, in easy terms, they've arrived.
Mm.
They've arrived at stewardship.
Mm.
One fella heard his testimony, said he was in his 80s. I finally made it.
Mm.
I've given $100 million.
Mm. Wow.
Now, that's a 5-talent guy.
Yeah, okay.
But I sat and listened to other men who were further ahead on this journey about what does stewardship over money and possessions look like. I sat with one man. It was a very, very modest house. And I'm looking around. You're teaching me? Until he said, God's led me to the point. I live on 10% of what I earn. I'm very successful. 90% goes to the kingdom. And 10% is more than I could ever have imagined that I wanted.
Got it.
That raised my sights, Greg.
Okay.
That this is what stewardship is about. And it leads into another common biblical teaching, generosity. Generosity changes everything. But when our belief system says, whatever I have is mine, mine, mine. And God, if you want some of it, here's my clenched hands.
Yes.
You pry the fingers apart if you
Right.
need something.
Yeah.
That was my initial immature belief as a young believer,
So obviously we have money as a resource, and money can be a huge blessing. You're in the business of helping people help their money grow.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Beyond money, what are some other resources that we are responsible for?
Well, it was kind of easy to me to get the money thing down.
Okay.
That's the way I'm wired.
Okay.
But then God began to open my understanding. I've given you more than money. I've given you more than stewardship over other people's money. So that in itself is ministry.
Right.
But I've given you a lot more. One of the things is relationship. I am the steward over my marriage. God may have brought Mary to me. We may be married for 20 years.
Yeah.
But we both belong to him.
Okay.
Got 9 grandchildren. That's where it's easier for me, Greg, to see the grandfather/steward. These youngsters, teenagers, young adults, 2 of them are married. I'm looked at as the elder in the generation, and I look to God. My role is to steward them, to teach them. The Bible talks about in several places, mostly Old Testament, the older men and women teaching the younger men and women, teaching them a lot more than just about how to pay their bills and save money,
Yes.
but how to walk in everything that we've been gifted with.
Yeah.
So, Greg, you and I have been friends for more than 10 years. I'm a steward of my relationship with you and vice versa.
Yes, you are.
That simple biblical principle,
Yeah.
your needs before mine. I'm not here to use you or take advantage of you, but for God to use me as a vessel to help you become the man that he's called you to do.
Yes.
And that's where we often need other people, to give us that objective position in working with other people and receiving.
Yes.
That's one of the great blessings for the many relationships God's given me,
Yes.
is I've got all of these people who dearly love me, but telling me the truth.
Okay. Part of being a good steward is being honest and helping other people grow.
Yes.
Yes. That's often uncomfortable. That's not everything we naturally lean into, right?
That's right.
But if I claim to love you as my brother,
Yes.
and I see that you may stumble in an area, I need to lean into that and help you see the error of your ways and help you recover from that. Is that fair to say?
That, and we automatically have 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of ears,
Yes.
listening to God
Yes.
for each other.
Okay. It's good. I love that. Before the podcast, as we were setting up, we were talking about hospitality. The first 15 years or so of my professional career was in hospitality, and both Samuel and Sam are here, and we were talking about that idea that, what is hospitality, and is it caring?
Very biblical.
It's caring for the feelings and concerns of other people.
Yeah.
So you talk about relationships that we're responsible for as stewards.
Yes.
If relationships are significant resources, I keep flashing back to, I think it's in Matthew, where Jesus was in the streets and the religious people of the day were kind of pressing him, trying to discredit him, and they asked him the question, what's the greatest of all commandments?
Yeah.
He could have listed any one of the 613 commandments that, the Jewish church had at that point in time, as you need to dot all these I's and cross all these T's in order for you to be right with God. And he said, number 1 is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. But the second is like the first. It's like the first. So love people with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength. That's interesting
People
to me.
is the stewardship.
And he said, all of the law and the prophets fall under these things.
Yeah.
So our relationships are more important than really anything else, I think, is what he was saying.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
So not just my relationship with my wife or my significant other or my children or my grandchildren, but it's really, I mean, I chatted with people at the grocery store this morning,
Yeah.
their relationship, we do have relationship with almost everyone that we run into. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Some kind of relationship.
So what kind of a relationship do we want to have? How do I want to see that person? How does God want to use me, if he does, to impact this person?
Okay.
It's looking at every resource.
Right.
So I learned a very important life-changing principle that I wanted to share because it's kind of built into stewardship.
Yes, tell me that.
About 25 years ago, life coaching became the buzzword, particularly in Christian communities.
Okay.
And I wanted to be trained as a life coach, not because I wanted to do that, but because the skill sets fit in with what I did in serving people through my profession. So I hired a coach. She was, of course, a believer. Here's the most important thing that she said that I've never heard from anyone else.
Okay.
She said, in any situation, as a believer, you have a role, God has a role. Now, my role is really simple. It's three things.
Okay.
First role is, and of course, I applied this at the time to my role as a financial advisor. She said, you show up 100% honest. Now, think about it. How many people would say they have been treated dishonestly with something about money? And I took what she said and I said, I've got to define that a little further. I call it transparent honesty.
Okay.
Many times when I'm talking to someone about their money, they don't even know the questions to ask me.
Right.
And I could so easily mislead them on what I don't tell them. Well, I tell them everything. What's the good versus the bad? What's the worst case? What's this going to cost you? And Greg, I've had people say, thank you for being honest. This is not what I want to do. Okay.
Yes.
So being honest, number one.
Okay.
Number two, walk a life of integrity. Now, I took that one and made it practical. When I was building a practice here in the Villages area, we spoke to over 400 different groups. And I knew it's important, me just being the guy up on the stage, who the heck is he?
Yes.
To build trust, to demonstrate integrity. This is what I said. Folks, if you saw me walking into a hotel with anybody other than Mary, can you say you would not ask yourself if he's cheating on her? Do we want to trust him with our money?
Yes.
That's integrity.
Yeah. Got it.
So you get those things in line in your life.
Okay.
And number three is when you do those two, you're totally honest, you walk in integrity.
Okay.
You have no more agenda. You trust God for the outcome. Now, Greg, you and I both have years of sales training.
Yes.
On the stewardship side, we can rightfully say that was to make me a better realtor,
Yes.
better businessman, a better financial guy. And those things are true. But all of these sales training courses are designed to do one thing, close the deal. In this insurance company I told you about,
Yes.
while I was there, spent 22 years with them, they celebrated their 100th year as a company. They commissioned a book to be written about the 100 years. I don't know if they regretted that later or not because of some of the things that came out. But the story I remember, because every Friday we go to a sales meeting, we turn into our manager what we sold
Right.
that week. And they start reading off the names, Sam's number 1, Bill's number 2, every week. Well, this book revealed back in the 40s during those sales meetings, the lowest man in sales that week sat in the corner of the room on a stool with a dunce hat on.
Oh my gosh.
That kind of epitomizes when the only objective is who can close the most
Yes.
business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how that looks and feels. But yet we're accountable.
Yes.
If we're not good businessmen, if we're not the 5 talent who watches that so that it grows.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you draw the line?
Mm.
Well, in all those years of building the practice and speaking to groups, we would offer them the opportunity at the end of the 30-minute meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd like to meet with one of us, here's a card, put your name and your phone number on it.
Yes.
Mary would count those, and we would keep records. We would determine our worth by how many people asked to see us. Okay. And if we had a week that wasn't good, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
I failed.
Yeah.
I didn't get enough people to sign.
Yeah.
When this concept of letting God be responsible for the results.
Yes.
I remember the day. Mary and I walked out of the seminar. We packed up. We were in the car. She had the stack of cards getting ready to count.
Yes.
And I said, Mary, put those away.
Mm.
We're not counting anymore.
Wow.
Next couple of years, business doubled.
Wow.
I wasn't managing something as if it were mine.
Right.
I had shown up and been truthful and walking in integrity. So my expectations were gone, and God's were available to do what he wanted to do. And I have run my business ever since.
Yeah.
I've had good years, had not so good years. Don't care, God. I'm still educating myself. I'm still training, still becoming a better steward. But he chooses.
Yes. Trust him with the outcome.
Trust him with the outcome.
So as a steward, you see yourself as a steward of relationships.
Yes.
And yes, part of that has to do with advising people about their finances.
Yes.
But it's bigger than that. And your responsibilities in stewardship include being 100% honest.
Yes.
Transparently honest, which means it matters as much about we didn't tell someone as what we did tell them, right? So full disclosure, we're going to give them all the good and the bad and let them make their own decisions so that we can honor God with our behavior.
Yeah, in your profession, you show a house.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're not honest and you don't tell the person, well, here's a problem they had.
Yes. Yeah, we're more concerned about helping them make great decisions about their future than we are about earning a commission.
Yeah.
Yes. You want to walk a life of integrity. And to me, integrity is this is who I say I am, and my behavior and actions are consistent with the person that I say I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's why we need the close relationships that I share with you, that you have many other men, I have other men.
Yes.
Is we need people watching for that.
Yes.
And people saying, let's talk about that. That doesn't come across as the person that I know you to be. And it just keeps us focused.
And then the third thing was, we talked about that this morning with the team also.
Yeah.
Hey, let's just do what God's calling us to do and do the best that we can. Use the gifts and the talents. That's the other thing about stewardship. Like, he wired me to do certain work in a certain way. If I'm not fully leaning into that and growing myself to a place where I am living in my potential, then I'm not being a good steward of the number one resource that he gave me, which is me. Yeah. And trusting him for the outcome, that was number 3. So honesty, walking in integrity, and no more agenda. You're going to allow God to bring you the right people for the right reasons so that you can serve them and love on them in a way that honors him. Is that fair to say?
And, there's 2 groups of people in general that are listening, people that work for somebody else.
Yes.
And people that own the business. They both have stewardship. If you're an employee, your stewardship is doing the best job you can do for your employer. If you're the business owner, the employer, you're a stewardship over these employees. They're more than just somebody performs a task. You're to invest in their lives.
Yes.
And one day when God's called them somewhere else, they look back on what you did for them and they see God's hand in that. And they know what it's like to be treated well. Most people would say they know more about what it's like not to be treated well.
Yeah, there's a restaurateur named Danny Meyer that has gotten pretty popular and pretty famous over the last 20 years. And he says, there's a mindset in the service industry that the customer always comes first.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't necessarily subscribe to that.
Uh-huh.
He says, my team, they come first.
They come first.
And if they have all the resources, if they have all the training, if they have the support and environment from leadership that they need, then the customer will benefit from that.
Yeah.
So the guest experience comes through taking great care of the team and giving them what they need to perform at the highest level. So stewardship is a big deal, man. It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it. A lot of people don't really talk about what it means to be a steward, right? To be charged with the care and responsibility of someone else's resources. As Christians, we look at all of our resources as belonging to God.
Yeah, we know that.
It's true. I mean, that he provides every opportunity for us.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants us to be in relationship with other people. Believers or not, that we're in relationship with every human that we come in contact with. And that's the number one thing he charges us with responsibility for, is caring for that relationship. So,
well, it goes along with what you just said about the team comes first.
Yes.
I come first, meaning if I'm not a steward over my own self,
Yes.
then I don't go to school.
Yes.
I have faulty training. I put people in situations out of my ignorance that are not good for them.
Yes.
So I have to be a steward over myself as well as over the people.
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's the concept that we subscribe to, at True North Development is we were created with certain talents, certain resources. No one else will ever have the DNA that I have. No one else has ever had it.
Right.
And if I don't lean into my own personal growth and become the person that I was created to be, I'm not being a great steward of the number one resource that he's given me is my own person, right? So that's awesome. I love that. So we have people, you mentioned a couple of groups of people. You have employees, people that have a job that serve an employer. You have employers that have stewardship over their team.
Yeah.
Any other groups of people, I guess, entrepreneurs, maybe like I'm a sole proprietor right now, I have stewardship over guests in my podcast, over the team that is recording this right now, over every client that I engaged with, right? People at the front desk, people that lease space in this building, right? So.
And it's pretty global. You and I are both involved in our church. So
yes.
I have several roles in the church.
Yes.
But what all of those mean is I'm a steward over the people that God sends to our church.
Yes.
First of all, on their spiritual health.
Yes.
That's why we follow Scripture in our churches and, God's guidelines for what keeps us healthy.
Yes.
But people tend to look up to people with titles.
Yes. Yes.
I wish I didn't have to have a title.
Yes.
Because my goal is these are the most precious people. We share an intimate faith together.
Yes.
I don't share that intimate faith with many of my clients.
Right.
They're just transactional.
So resources, and we'll include some of the things we've spoke of today in the show notes so people have access to them. What can people do if they want to lean in and be better stewards? Could be their finances, could be of their physical resources, their car, their home, whatever, their boat. Could be relationships they have in their life. What are some resources that we can direct people to so that they can grow in this space?
Well, no better example than what you did before this meeting. When I texted you, I think God's saying, let's talk about stewardship.
Okay.
You sent me a podcast of a recording by a very well-known pastor
Yes.
speaking on this very issue. His was specifically financial stewardship.
Okay.
I've heard tons of those. He was the best I ever heard.
Okay.
So if I were listening to this and saying, I want to find out how to be a better steward,
Okay.
what about YouTube?
Okay.
What about Google?
I love that.
Now, you need to work with trusted
Yes.
people, not people even within the church, just after your money,
Yes.
but people who are speaking truth
Yes.
and that you can learn and grow from. If it's technical, professional, you're in a sales profession, okay? Tons of stuff
Got it.
available. Archie Bunker, 6 weeks after he hired me,
Yes.
he told me I was going to take the Dale Carnegie sales course.
Oh.
I said, I can't afford it. He said, you're going to take. So I went down. I don't remember how I paid the $600.
Huh.
There were 19 salesmen in my class
Yes.
selling everything from roofing to motor,
Yes.
everything. And yet we all learned the same skills. My distinction was I didn't have a history. I had just started. At the end of that course, each of us made a presentation to the other salesmen of us demonstrating us selling our product or service.
Got it.
And then we voted.
Okay.
Greg, that plaque's been on my wall for 50 years.
Oh, really?
It had nothing to do with how much I'd sold,
Yes.
but me demonstrating my true caring about what I did,
Yes.
and it came through.
It's interesting you say that. I've got another friend that I'm working with that is venturing into a new career. And he comes in with all of this vast skill set.
Yeah.
It's all related to caring for people. And I'm trying to encourage him not to worry. It's less about the technical skill and more about what you're able to do for people and serve them in a way that is memorable and that they can trust you. You mentioned trust a number of times as it relates to stewardship. And when people can trust us to help them walk through a difficult situation, you know, the paycheck will take care of itself.
Yeah.
So your advice is find resources. If you want to be a better steward of your money, find a financial resource. If you want to be a better steward of your children, there are resources available, right? Yeah. We'll add some to the show notes so people have a place to start. But
let me make one resource not commonly known.
Okay. Go.
Okay.
Yes.
The voice of Christian finance back in the 80s was a fellow by the name of Larry Burkett.
Yes.
He wrote all the books. He was known for that.
Yes.
Before he died, God gave him a vision to raise up an army of financial professionals for the end times. He died shortly after he got that vision. A gentleman by the name of Ron Blue, who was an advisor, picked up that vision, and 20 years ago, he came to First Baptist Church in Orlando and invited a whole bunch of financial advisors. He said what I just said. He was carrying forth Larry's vision, and he said, I'll be teaching my first class for certified kingdom advisors. In February, this past February, I went to the annual Kingdom Advisors Conference. There were 2,500 that came to the conference. They honored Ron. They brought him up on the stage. And they asked him what I was thinking. What's it like? 20 years ago, you started training us, and now there's 2,500 that showed up. His answer was, all I did was follow God's instruction at the time. But for believers, look up Kingdom Advisors. If you want someone to offer you biblical financial wisdom,
thank you.
That's where you'll get it.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. And the advice today is, regardless of the area that you're looking to grow in, to lean into stewardship and be a great steward of that area of your life, find help. Google it, YouTube it, reach out to a friend, get some support as it relates to how we can be better stewards in all of our relationships.
Yes.
Awesome. We'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to learn more about what it means to discover and walk in your full potential, click the link below or go to True North Development.